Okay, I know what you're thinking. Whenever someone gets a nosebleed in an anime, it's because they're, well, basically a sex criminal. And we've seen Sanji fly across the sky on jets of his own blood, and there's Masaroshi, who introduced a whole generation to the nosebleed trope, and introduced Bulma to a lifetime of irreversible trauma. So I'm sure you think you know what anime nosebleeds are all about, but I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. Or at least that there's more to it. Let's start by looking at the science of nosebleeds. So I always thought of nosebleeds as something that happened on the playground, maybe after taking a ball to the face, or if you're my brother, after eating warm chocolate for some reason. And we all had that one friend who was always looking for Kleenex to shove in their nose. Maybe you were that friend, I'm not here to judge. Medically speaking, most nosebleeds we experience are known as common nosebleeds, which is more of a synonym than a medical term, but sure. These occur when a group of blood vessels rupture in a nostril, which can happen in cold weather or dry climates, or if your nose is irritated, or if you get punched in the wrist while picking your nose in a frozen tundra. These nosebleeds usually happen in just one nostril. Usually. Now, we've seen the one nostril drip happen in anime, usually as a great sigh of self-control on the part of the bleeder. But what we see way more often is the wild fountain of blood bursting from both nostrils. And yes, there does seem to be some equivalent in real life. You can get a severe nosebleed from the back of your nose, which happens when arteries close to your throat rupture and is often attributed to high blood pressure or assassin strikes. So, if you've ever seen a violent nosebleed, it's probably one of those. Sure, there's not enough blood to send you flying across the room, but it'll take more than a couple Kleenexes to clean up. So yeah, anime nosebleeds aren't entirely out of the realm of possibility, but let's take a look back at our source material for just a second. The nosebleed gag has been around for decades and is called hanajibu in Japanese, and it's been enthusiastically adopted by anime creators and fans, but again, I must ask, why? Why anime? Now, a bunch of you are probably shouting at the screen right now, "It means you have a boner!" And okay, yes, I hear you, I acknowledge you, I appreciate you, but calm the f down. Yeah, there's plenty to support the idea that nosebleeds in anime are tied to arousal. I mean, if harem anime has done nothing else, it's framed the nosebleed as a useful, if creepy, plot device. And yes, they usually happen in the company of a love interest, so if you're one of these dick fiends in the comments, I guess you can stop watching now. For the remaining 3 of you, what I want to know is why we so frequently use nosebleeds to signal desire. Now, one possible explanation is censorship. Anime gives us nosebleeds because it can't give us what it knows we want, hard dicks. Boners! Watch this at full volume. No headphones. And maybe that's part of it, but I don't know that it's just a censorship thing. I mean, for one thing, when an anime series wants to censor something, they just kind of do it. You know, they'll use random lens flares to hide nudity, like in Nudist Beach from Kill la Kill, or they'll just give no f***s and cover things up with giant black circles. These days, painfully conspicuous censorship is used for comedic effect, like in Love Tyrant or Grand Blue, or dick-ass shit. There are sources that suggest a connection between nosebleeds and professional wrestling, and sure, I'll bite. So wrestlers use a practice called blading to make their matches a little gorier. They use razors to intentionally cut themselves, usually on the forehead. Forehead cuts tend to bleed profusely, even if cuts are shallow, and when the blood mixes with sweat, the wounds tend to look even more serious. Blading definitely ups the intensity of wrestling matches the same way nosebleeds amp up the sexual tension in anime, and it seems like pro wrestling and the nosebleed gag can both trace their origins back to the 60s, so it's a possibility that nosebleeds were inspired by pro wrestlers, but it kind of feels more like vague word association to me. Some sources go back much further, claiming it may have come from an old wives' tale. It's entirely impossible to substantiate, but some dusty corners of the internet claim that in feudal Japan, men would force themselves to blush whenever they passed women they liked as a polite way of showing their attraction. And now a brief moment of silence for the women who had to endure the weird that once passed for polite. Ugh. Thank God now you can just follow someone on Instagram and accidentally like a post from 4 years ago and it never comes up in conversation, but you know they know and you want to clear the air but feel like if they don't mention it, maybe what's the big deal? But your friendship just never feels the same. But anyway, dudes in Japan used to force so much blood in their head it would cause a nosebleed. However, this isn't exactly the kind of nosebleed we're talking about. In anime, nosebleeds are almost always used for comedic effect. This story about feudal Japan, almost criminally unfunny, and criminally some other things too. To find the very first gag nosebleed, we have to look to a 1970s manga by Yasuji Tanioka called Yasuji no Meta Meta Gaki Dokoza. His manga were over-the-top slapstick stories that often focus on young kids' antics. Tanioka's nosebleed gag gained popularity, and other mangaka began using it all across Japan. Tanioka's obituary even credits him with inventing the nosebleed gag, so it's possible that I just did a lot of unnecessary research. Okay, but so far everything still points to nosebleeds just meaning boners, or at least nothing makes a strong enough argument against it, which I'm not happy about. But I'll at least offer another theory and see if it sticks. So Japanese culture places a lot of value in good manners. For example, it's considered incredibly rude to stare in Japan. So it's possible that sometimes, okay, maybe not all the time, but sometimes, nosebleeds just represent embarrassment or other overwhelming emotions. So like if a character accidentally walks into the girls' locker room, sure, he'll get a nosebleed, but maybe it's just because he's embarrassed by his own miscalculation and not just because he saw boobs? I don't know, Adrian, this doesn't hold up to me. I don't buy it. But sure, it would make sense if it was blood rushing to his face that caused a nosebleed, and I guess that lines up with the folktale from earlier, because those guys got nosebleeds from blushing, albeit some weird forced blushing, and not just because the blood had to go somewhere. I mean, there's a whole anime about a vampire who more or less gets nosebleeds for those exact reasons. Regardless, most of the time when a character gets a nosebleed, they faint or bend backwards, so they aren't staring for long enough to bone up anyway. Ugh, did I already bone up? I've never said that. Ew. Sorry. Ew. So while there are definitely tons of pervy nosebleeds, there are also plenty that can be chalked up to pure embarrassment. So there are at least two variations on that. But I also want to throw another emergent anime trope into the mix. What is up with all the drooling? I'm seeing more and more drooling recently, and it seems like it's mostly used as an alternative to the nosebleed. Now, much like nosebleeds, drooling can be code for attraction, but it seems to encompass a much broader scope of emotions. Drooling typically happens when a character is overwhelmed. Take Gibril from No Game, No Life. Whenever Shiro whips out his tablet, Gibril goes basically insane. Human technology gives her such a high that she's willing to challenge Blank for it, even though she has literally all the knowledge in the world. And in My Hero Academia, we see the Class 1A girls drooling like a horny garden hose when they get to peek into the boys' dorm room. In real life, drooling indicates thirst, actual physical thirst, but also Instagram thirst. It's not clear yet whether that colloquialism has made it to Japan, but I'll hold that up as a possibility. In any case, drooling in anime seems to be a direct offshoot of the nosebleed trope and possibly the American colloquialism. Nosebleeds are so prominent in anime that they've inspired a trope within a trope. Tanioka would be proud. And nosebleeds have also inspired several anime series that use the gag as the central focus of the story. I already mentioned Karin, a rom-com about a vampire who releases blood through her nose instead of ingesting it. In addition to that, there's another nosebleed-centric anime called Punchline, in which the tragic main character Yuta can't have nosebleeds because they're literally so intense they would destroy the world. And then there's Baka and Test, which has so many nosebleeds, I couldn't imagine those guys' health holding up for another season. I guess nosebleeds are just one of those sorta inscrutable but ridiculously common anime tropes, like why characters always scream, or how the main character always has to sit in the back row by a window. And what does the humble nosebleed mean? Well, at the end of the day, it's just a pick your poison situation. Master Roshi's nosebleeds leave little to the imagination, but Yuri's adorable nosebleed, up for interpretation. Whether it's attraction, embarrassment, or some other cataclysmically overwhelming emotion, nosebleeds will be around forever, begging the question, why anime? I'm Yedoye Travis, and if you like what you've been watching, consider subscribing to GetintheRobot, your anime explainer. I think it's boners. I really think it's boners. Like, it seems like it's just boners.